So it sounds like, Jay, you were talking about the issue that we're kind of used to doing quarter 1 through 4 and then quarter 1 through 4, but OPTIS it's quarter 1 through 8. So
right.
Yeah,
and
that's something new to get.
I think we decided with everything now at PTD that it's going to be 1 through 8.
Okay, so we
just to keep it
that.
straight.
Okay, that's
Where we can do it.
I also wanted to mention that if you have STF formula grants, you do not need to request reimbursement. You don't have to go into OPTIS and create a reimbursement request for that. We do that for you automatically.
It doesn't automatically just get sent to us each quarter?
Well,
at the beginning of the quarter.
It's not automatic. Somebody has to go in and
well, I mean,
create it
for
in
us,
OPTIS. Yeah.
it just pops into
She's
our
basically,
account.
Francine goes in and creates reimbursement requests
Okay.
and then completes the payment request and gets you paid. And we do that for you. So we've had that question before, and I kind of sometimes forget to mention that you don't. OPTIS is the same.
Because there's no grant match required for those.
Right.
It's a set formula, so it's easy just to say, okay, here's your buddy.
Something
That's
else?
not true though with STF discretionary.
Right. It's just the formula.
Yeah, the formula where there's no match. Right?
There isn't with discretionary either, I don't think.
Sometimes it
Oh.
There is some, okay.
But discretionary, we do need to submit?
Yes.
No, we got an extra candidate. What's the amount, the extra $2 million that got dispersed?
That's the STO.
Yeah,
which
the
is
STO
the
money,
formula.
that extra money that just, that's part of, I don't have to.
And that's part
because
of
Jean told
the-
me I didn't have to do anything, that would
Yeah.
just be sent to
So the
us.
STF and STO formula will get paid at the same time, and that's the one that's automatic
Okay.
for you.
But there are also state grants that are discretionary that do have
Yeah.
matching
Okay.
that you do would have to. That brings me up to another thing, which thank you, Francine, for reminding me. If you have a grant that is 100% funded, like the R grants, there's no match. In OPTIS, you still need to go in to match expense, click on the little 0, and put. I think you just have to go to that screen.
Yeah.
So that it knows you visited it, even though there's nothing
Wants to be visited.
Well, it does, and then you'll be able to proceed. So you may think, oh, there is no match. I don't need to go into that little, but you do. Otherwise, you'll get an error at the end. I wanted to mention, if I didn't before, that this is a reimbursement request, and the effective date and execution date refer to the grant agreement, not this document. The process date, I forget, so I wrote it down, is the date that this particular reimbursement request was processed. So process date applies to the reimbursement request. The other two dates apply to the grant agreement.
I'm sorry, what did you say the effective and execution dates were?
The effective date is the earliest possible start date for your agreement when it's first written. It could not be executed before that date. Sometimes it takes 21 days before it's actually signed and everything, and that becomes the execution date.
Okay.
That makes sense? Okay.
Date it's signed, yeah.
Is that all automatically put in there, or do we have to put that in ourselves?
That pulls from the
Oh, it does, okay.
from your agreement, so it's fine. Yeah. But sometimes it's confusing to know what that is. And then I was helping Doreen, and I forgot to mention that you can look down here. This is sub-grant reimbursement request summary. So this keeps a running balance of what's left in each of these columns. And you notice that it's tracking the match. So when this grant was funded, the total match is this number. And you can't overmatch in OPTIS, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in the advanced topics, but in the past you could submit, say you only were required to have $500 a match, but you had all this cash on hand. I don't know why this would be, why people would have all this cash, but you could report you had $10,000 in match, and Sharon would look at that and say, oh, well, they've got plenty of match to cover this reimbursement request, we're fine. OPTIS, if you did that, would just keep adding your match to this number, and eventually you get to a point, actually to this number, you get to a point where the match was more than that, and you get an error, because it say, you've already told us you have all your match, and so we're not going to, OPTIS isn't going to accept any more match. So don't overmatch, only indicate the exact amount of match that is necessary to get that reimbursement. Does that make sense? And if you see negative numbers here, you're not going to be able to complete the reimbursement request. That means you've overspent. Sometimes that happens when you start a reimbursement request, or 2 or 3, and don't complete them and forgot that you did that and you go in to start the same one again, well, it's still tracking your expenses that you've recorded, and the balance may be negative numbers. So that's when you would need to do a search for all your reimbursement requests and make sure that you don't have some existing in there that are like holding on to that money, basically, and you just need to delete those. And anytime an agreement or a document is not completed, which this one is, you can go to actions. It's not in my queue, I guess, so I can't, but if it was in your queue, there'd be a delete button and you could delete it. Okay. Other questions about reimbursement or things that happened when you were trying to do your own that were confusing, or nothing?
Yeah, I just failed the integrity test when I tried to submit this.
And that's an important thing. When you get an error message, read what it says. It tries to be helpful. And for the most part, it will tell you what's going on. Sometimes it'll just say error, and then you don't know. But when you first go into match expense and you click on this, it's a 0. If you look above this line up here, it has this expected match. So it does do the calculation for you, and you can, usually you just take that number and put it down here, unless you need to divide it between local and other or something like that. So it's doing the math for you, but it still requires that you enter that number. Okay, so Jenny's going to explain a glitch in OPTIS and hopefully how to fix it.
Okay, I hope so too.
Okay.
So if we open that up, and so we walked through all of these different fields. We walked through our first wizard to set up the structure. We did the record expense, and then we went into the match expense. So for right now, let's go into match expense. And when we first opened this, there where it says 7999, it said 8,000. And where it said match, it said 0, which is what it always says when you first open it up. So go ahead, if you would, Miley, and click in there. So we came in here, and it asked for an expected match of 2001. So we applied that 2001, and we clicked submit, which brought us back here. And so our 2001 was entered there, but reimbursement requested still said 8,000. And those two numbers don't add up to 10,000, they add up to 10,001. So we had to change reimbursement requested to 7,999 for the
And what she
a
just
glitch.
described is a glitch in OPTIS.
Really
It doesn't like refresh when you change it. It's still pulling from record expense, I think.
Yeah, because I just did the same thing. I just noticed that because I put match. It was like $1,000. The match they said 440, and it said expected reimbursement requested 560. When I put $1,000 back in there, and it still let me keep it. And I had to go back and oh wait, that's not right. It has to be 5,600.
It's kind of an unfortunate thing because it doesn't clear it. Francine?
Did you want to talk about the round up, round down?
Well, this
We
is
might as
kind of
well.
what we're talking about. The OPTIS will automatically ask for the match to round up $1 and for the payment to round down $1 if the math calculates sense, because we have to use even dollar amounts. And so, you know, Jay might have been talking about this a little bit, that some people have found that as long as those two numbers add up to total expenses, if it's $1 off from the expected match, OPTIS will let you close it that way. But we ask people to enter the amount that's on expected match because it makes sure that we don't end up with a problem at the end of the grant when we do the final payment if you're requesting all the funds in the grant. So it's always best to look at that expected match number and use that. And then if you have to adjust this reimbursement requested number down $1 to make the math right in this screen, just adjust it.
So it's a little sticky there. So this is now correct. Because,
The match and the
yeah.
reimbursement requested total expense.
Okay, so when you're doing the quarterly report, there's actually a step where you have to choose the authorized representative from a drop-down menu and you select them, and then that appears on the periodic report. For a reimbursement request, this name, which isn't appearing now, of the authorized representative doesn't appear until you go to complete the step and check this and submit it, it's not letting us here, but enter your e-response keyword and submit it, then it knows who you are because you're logged in as the primary user or the, not necessarily the primary user, the person with signature authority, and then it puts that name down there. So you don't see it until it's completed.
Okay, so I'm logged in as a user, and I should have logged in as Janice. That's probably why I'm having the problem.
It wants an e-response keyword.
It wants an e-response keyword in there.
And if you're not that level of user, then
right. So I've gone as far as I can go.
Right, and at that point, then you could forward it to the person who does have the e-response keyword, and then they can complete it.
Actions forward. Okay, now you report it to Jan.
Okay. Boy,
So here's another piece of paper. Some people love this, some people don't. It's a sort of a process flow for all of OPTIS, and I'm not going to spend. So what I just passed out is how documents progress through the system in OPTIS. And it looks a little bit blurry to me, but starts with applicants, which is you. The application notice is created. And we do this, even though we don't use OPTIS for you to apply. We take your applications and we create the application. Actually, I take that back. The application notice is the announcement. So that's what we first create and then post, and then you could apply for agreements or grants through this. And then we would create the application header, which would be one per agency per type of funding. And we'd label it something like this, RBTD Elderly and Disabled Package. It would be all your projects that you're applying for. And then we take each one of these projects and create an application project header of it. So it contains one project, and it's the funds that you've requested. And along with that is the detail that goes with it. Just kind of like your grant agreement or well, you've seen that in the grant agreement. It'll say project, I don't know if it says project header or project detail, but there's those boxes. That's where this corresponds. And so you've requested the funds. Then once we have agreed to fund this, the funds are committed. And at that point we can assign a central file number, and we know exactly what the match and all the details would be. And it has a corresponding project detail. And both of those have to be issued. And once they're issued, then we create this ordered list, or OPTIS creates this ordered list of projects. So it's all approved projects for each one of these types of grants. And that's what we use to create our application to the feds for the funding. So we have this funding application. POP is Program of Projects. So we have this detailed document of all the projects that have been applied for, and we submit that to FTA. And we do have to do it in OPTIS for state funds, but we don't actually apply to the state with a program of projects. And then Ivan has already created a fund header and a fund instance in OPTIS, so it's the source of the funds, so he'll set it up like 5310. And then the fund instance is for each year of appropriation, and it's the bucket of money or whatever. So those are set up in the system. So this all is kind of interrelated. And all these white ones are not anything that you would see in the system, but that's kind of what's happening behind the scenes. And then so then the funds are committed, and then once we attach them to a sub-grant agreement, they're considered encumbered. And this is where admin staff would create your grant agreement, and so they start a grant agreement and then they go and pull the different projects into the grant agreement. And then once those are executed, then you can start requesting reimbursement, and then you get paid. And then these up here are kind of peripheral, but you do have to have your periodic report in with information about all your sub-grant agreements in order to get your reimbursement request. And then, of course, we talk a lot about the assets and how that feeds into the periodic report and pulls up into it. So that's just kind of a really big picture. Since OPTIS is made up of so many different little parts and so many little different screens, it's kind of hard to really get your mind around what's happening. That was sort of my attempt to help with that. So questions at all about anything?
I think I'll go back to our general manager and say, I put this together for you.